I believe laws exist to protect people and society, but it's also true that there are those who exploit legal loopholes to commit wrongdoings. Perhaps knowledge of the law is necessary to fight such evils. My name is Casey. Justice is the order of society, said Aristotle, an ancient Greek philosopher. Order, I get that. It refers to the rationale required for a society or such to be in this state of organization. But what is justice? It's a term that defines the correctness of human actions, but what's considered right can vary based on era, regional characteristics, religion, race, and various other factors. For instance, during war, defeating the enemy was justice, and for followers of certain religions, adhering to their teachings is the highest form of justice. But in today's society, harming an enemy is a crime, and for those not affiliated with a religion, they might not find justice in its doctrines. This has turned into a philosophical discussion, but it makes me wonder how Aristotle would explain it. I believe that creating and upholding rules for a safe and secure society is the justice demanded in our current world. I've always pondered about justice. This was largely influenced by my father, but I think it's also a part of my inherent nature. My father had strong convictions and despised injustice and wrongdoing. He often explained to my younger brother, who's 4 years younger than me, in age-appropriate, simple words about how people should be. Even as a child, I found his talks convincing and deeply impactful, and I was greatly influenced by them. Considering innate nature, being born as his daughter, I suppose genetically, his influence is the most significant. It was around middle school when I started taking an interest in law. At that time, TV dramas about prosecutors, judges, and lawyers were successively airing and gaining popularity. Though I was a strong-minded middle school student, I followed the trends like everyone else. What set me apart was my deep interest in the nature of those jobs, and seriously pondering what I would do in their place. Of course, like any regular viewer, I also admired the popular actors, and fell in love with the band singing the theme songs. That's how I became drawn to the world of law and legal studies. I haven't publicly admitted that my interest stems from the popularity of these legal dramas. Even if I was just a fan of the dramas, they genuinely captivated me, leading me to aspire to study law in college, where I was admitted and graduated with excellent grades. It's odd to say it myself, but I worked hard and learned a lot about law in those 4 years. After graduating, I was uncertain about my career path, so I worked in a field that piqued my interest for a couple of years, gaining life experience before my interest in legal work returned. Eventually, I secured a position at the Bar Association, overseeing lawyers in the state. Working in the legal field broadened my perspective on society. I became dedicated to finding ways to help the underprivileged who, faced with societal injustices, had no choice but to surrender without resistance. This quest became my life's work, and I immersed myself in it. So engrossed was I that time flew by, and before I knew it, I was nearing 30. It was then that the president of the Bar Association where I worked suggested a transfer to a bar association in Boston. According to him, Boston was fraught with problems, and he believed my efforts could help cleanse the city. Pleased that he recognized my abilities and intrigued by the new challenge, I accepted his offer. In the US, becoming a lawyer requires a membership in a state bar association, a private organization overseeing lawyers' activities. Since lawyers work at law firms, bar associations don't directly handle cases from clients. One of my roles was managing a legal consultation service for the public. There are far more people in legal distress than commonly thought, and I wanted to help as many as I could. Law firms and individual lawyers have their specializations, like criminal law, civil cases, traffic accidents, or divorce issues. Within the area overseen by our bar association, there was a firm notably dedicated to public legal consultations. Though it was partly a business strategy to attract clients, their active engagement in less profitable areas clearly showed their commitment to helping the public. Stanley, a lawyer at this firm, was actively involved in our legal consultation service. I admired his approach, always considering the citizen's perspective. Casey, the consultation desk is open until 5 p.m. today, right? Let's try to help as many people as possible. Thank you as always. I think it's going to be busier than usual today. Stanley listened attentively to each client and offered precise advice. In cases where advice wasn't enough, he carefully explained the necessary costs before suggesting they use a law firm's services. His intent to help those in trouble, rather than mere profit, was clear. Of all the lawyers I've met, Stanley is among the very best. As we spent more time together, Stanley and I grew closer, discussing various matters including work. Once, he mentioned being troubled over a case he was handling. I cautiously asked about the case, prefacing with, "If it's okay to ask." Though he might have thought it was pointless to discuss it with a staff member like me, he showed no such reservations and shared the details. While he probably did so casually, I was thrilled that he trusted me and wanted to help in any way I could. The case had 2 key points, and as I listened, possible solutions began to emerge. I chose my words and expressions carefully to avoid seeming presumptuous and share my thoughts. He genuinely appreciated my input. "Wow, I hadn't thought of that." "Thanks, that's really helpful," he said with an untroubled smile, and I rediscovered his broad-mindedness and rich humanity. About half a month later, Stanley came to me looking delighted. "Thanks for your advice the other day. Everything went well just as you suggested, Casey." The client was satisfied, and it even boosted my reputation. "I'm glad I could help. You know, Casey, you're really knowledgeable about law and adept at problem solving. Did you ever work as a paralegal at a law firm?" "Oh no, I just studied a bit of law. It helps with my job at the administration office." I had to be vague in my response, not able to give a straight answer. "I see, but you're really talented and smart. So, as a thank you, would you let me treat you to a meal?" Although I hesitated, Stanley insisted, saying, "Please, I'd really like to treat you to dinner," and I ended up accepting the invitation. I couldn't refuse outright, but deep down I was genuinely pleased. The restaurant Stanley chose was stylish yet relaxed, suitable for adults, a new experience for me who had always been focused on work. He was a great conversationalist, never letting me get bored. He spoke passionately about his job, but also had interesting hobbies outside of work. Our conversation wasn't one-sided. He skillfully engaged me, making it a pleasant exchange of words. As the evening seemed to be drawing to a close, Stanley said, "Thanks for joining me today. I invited you under the pretext of thanking you for the other day, but I've wanted to ask you out for a long time. I'm glad I finally got the chance, and I don't want it to be just for today." After these words, Stanley seriously asked me to be his girlfriend. Having never been approached like this by a man, I was initially stunned, but soon found myself naturally responding, "Yes, I'd be happy to." Our relationship began, and I found the new essence it added to my daily life refreshingly delightful. Stanley frequently consulted me about work, and my earnest efforts to help seemed to be precisely what he needed, as his work was going smoothly. Seeing him happy made me happy too. I felt like a wife supporting her husband from behind the scenes. Just thinking about it made me blush, as my mind wandered to the idea of marriage. As if God had read my thoughts, Stanley proposed, "Casey, will you marry me?" presenting a ring. In my heart, I exclaimed, "Thank you, God." And so we got married. I never imagined I'd be a married woman until recently, and it felt incredibly surreal. My parents and younger brother blessed our union, and I was truly happy. My uncle, who had always adored me since I was young, congratulated me on my marriage but looked troubled. My father explained that my uncle was probably feeling sad about me, whom he considered like a daughter, getting married. Married life was full of trial and error, but those challenges were enjoyable. The sense of satisfaction from each new discovery was undoubtedly what happiness felt like. I continued working, discussing it with Stanley, who gladly accepted it. So I strived to manage the household chores diligently. We both work, so let's not leave all the housework to you alone. We should cooperate as a couple, right? Stanley's considerate words deeply touched me. We celebrated our first wedding anniversary together with a toast. However, I've been worried about something concerning Stanley lately. First, he stopped working at the public consultation desk. He also stopped showing up at the bar association and seemed to consciously avoid front desk duties at the law firm. He must have his own vision and thoughts about his work. It's sad that he hasn't shared them with me, but I understand men want to make their own decisions. What's more concerning is that he's been coming home late. At the beginning of our marriage, he would rush home after work unless there was unexpected overtime, and we'd spend time together. But gradually, he started coming home later, and it's not uncommon for him to return after midnight now. Stanley, are you that busy with work? If so, I'm worried about your health. Please try to come home earlier. It's work, can't help it. Don't worry unnecessarily about me. But it's natural for a wife to worry. You often come home after the day changes. So what? I'm working hard. By the way, I have a business trip this weekend. A business trip? Why? What kind of case requires that? Stop nagging. It's necessary, so I'm going. It would be nice if you could just see me off happily. Stanley waved his hand dismissively and retreated to his room, sounding annoyed. That weekend, he really did go on an overnight business trip. Though it's not unheard of for lawyers to travel, I thought it was quite rare. When Stanley returned, he brought back a local delicacy as a souvenir, but I wasn't happy at all. His late returns continued, sometimes not coming home until the day had changed. And occasionally he was away for weekend work or business trips. Once, I found a long hair on his suit when he came home. Was it just an accidental attachment? But what kind of situation would lead to such an accident? My mind was in turmoil, desperately trying to make sense of things, but it was all in vain. I witnessed something that made it all clear. One day, when Stanley said he was going for work on a weekend, I decided to go out to the city for a change of scenery. Walking towards my favorite store in the downtown area, my eyes caught sight of someone emerging from a nearby alley, and I froze in place. It was Stanley, who was supposed to be working at that time. Just seeing him there at this hour was surprising enough. But what shocked me more was the woman walking beside him, their fingers intertwined like lovers. I was surprisingly calm. So, that's how it is, I thought to myself detached. Without realizing it, my feet followed them. About 10 minutes later, they disappeared into an entertainment district. That night, I sat quietly on the living room sofa, waiting for Stanley to return. At 12:30 a.m., he came home humming a tune. But when he saw me sitting there, he gasped in surprise. Welcome back, Stanley. You seem to have had a good time. Hard work, right? You're up? Good time. It was work, not exactly fun. Today, I went to the city. I saw you and a woman entering a suspicious place. How long have you been cheating? Stanley flinched for a moment at my words, but quickly recovered. What are you talking about? That's a big misunderstanding. If you saw us, you should have called out. She's a client. We had a meeting in that lounge, that's all. Really? Just a meeting in a lounge? And you had to pick up a key at the front desk? That's an interesting system. I didn't know that. I spoke coolly, suppressing my emotions. You saw that far? Even so, you can't just conclude it's cheating. What if I was just escorting her to her room? Really? You're quite kind to your clients. Stanley, sensing my attitude of seeing through everything, retorted angrily. Ugh, this is so annoying. There's no proof of me cheating, right? Anyway, I have something to say. It's a good opportunity. Let's get divorced. I'm tired of you. Stanley, you think of me like that? We've been married just over a year. Is there no love left? Facing me, Stanley changed completely and began to speak. Love, there was only a little at the beginning. I thought you looked younger than your age, so having you as my wife wasn't bad. And you're good at solving problems, so I thought you might be useful. That's a terrible thing to say, looking younger than my age. It's the truth. I thought you'd be useful, but you weren't. A disappointment. So you're no longer needed. I'll divorce you and marry someone more useful to me. I had once thought Stanley was a wonderful man, but perhaps this was his true self. With my limited experience in love, I couldn't see through Stanley's real nature. That was frustrating. So, you cheated because of this? Come on, how many times do I have to say it? Is there any proof of me cheating? Our divorce, well, let's call it irreconcilable differences. A 50-50 split. 50-50? But that doesn't sound right. Wouldn't this be a case for claiming compensation in a divorce trial? Compensation in a divorce trial? Where is the proof for that? Haha, if you can provide proof, I'll give you $500,000. Stanley was confident, believing he wouldn't be exposed. To me, that seemed foolish, and I couldn't help but laugh, ruining my attempt to remain cool and collected. Are you sure about that? Stanley's face contorted in surprise at my sudden change of demeanor. Your partner was Sarah, right? The receptionist at the office. You thought her father, who owns a big law firm, could be useful to you. How do you know about Sarah? Sorry to say, but even though we're married, I didn't share everything with you. I'm capable of many things. Like this, for example. I handed him a piece of paper. Stanley trembled in disbelief as he looked at it. It was a written statement from Sarah promising she would never see Stanley again. After witnessing them together today, I had waited and caught them coming out. Though they split up immediately, I managed to speak with Sarah alone. Since Stanley returned home late at night, he likely went out somewhere after the incident, but that's beside the point for now. I approached Sarah after she was left alone and informed her that I was aware of her involvement and the affair. Knowing who I was, she was visibly shaken. I took her to a nearby restaurant. There, I made her write a statement agreeing not to engage in any sexual or communicative relationship with Stanley in the future. Taking her to a public place ensured the statement was written voluntarily, without coercion or threats. Seeing the statement, Stanley gripped it tightly, shaking. Just writing this means? Yes. The statement doesn't apologize for the affair, but it essentially admits to it. You, as an excellent lawyer, understand this could be a significant piece of evidence in court, right? Stanley began to shake with the statement in his hand. Of course the statement was a copy, so tearing it up wouldn't matter. Then I presented Stanley with further proof of the affair. WhatsApp conversations between him and Sarah, receipts from restaurants they frequented on dates, and more. Since when did you gather all this? The confidence Stanley had earlier vanished, and his face turned pale. I'm glad to hear I'll be receiving $500,000 in compensation. My investigative skills and knowledge were honed after graduating from college, working at my father's detective agency. My father's sense of justice was put into practice by leading a company that exposed societal injustices. Drawn to my father's work due to a shared sense of justice, I spent 2 years studying and training in investigation, partly influenced by a detective TV show at the time. Perhaps, like when I aspired to enter the world of law, this was another sign of my lack of personal growth. However, this experience proved invaluable in my later work. The work is... I slowly pulled out a badge from my pocket and pinned it on my chest. Why do you have such a badge? Stanley's eyes widened in disbelief. The badge I wore was a lawyer's badge. Sorry I didn't tell you. I am a lawyer, just like you. Normally after college, one would proceed to law school, but I joined my father's agency for training and later enrolled in law school, eventually becoming a lawyer after completing the JD program. The president of the Bar Association where I first found employment was my uncle. Wanting to work broadly for the public, I requested to be affiliated with my uncle's office. I also placed my name at my uncle's law firm and gained experience as a lawyer. With my uncle's help, I managed to juggle these two roles, although it was physically demanding. My investigative skills, honed at my father's office, often proved necessary in legal practice. Over the years, my name became known in the legal world. I transferred to the current Bar Association in Boston, recommended by my uncle, while continuing to work at his firm and serving as a member of the disciplinary committee. When a lawyer commits an act of violating the law, it is first deliberated by the ethics committee of the Bar Association they belong to. If the committee deems the act intolerable, it is then brought to the disciplinary committee for review and possible sanctions. As someone in a position to judge lawyers, I had refrained from revealing this fact, even to my husband. Stanley, now aware of my true identity, was in a state of shock. Stanley, it seems you've been quite bad. A person of sound judgment has filed a complaint, and the disciplinary committee has already started to take action. What Stanley was doing, simply put, was guiding people in tax evasion. At the public consultation desk, he identified financially struggling individuals and craftily proposed tax evasion, teaching them the methods and making money from it. How could you? How could you find out all this? Stanley cried out in despair. His belief that he wouldn't be discovered was absurd. Subsequently, Stanley was arrested by the police. His tax evasion guidance was not just a solo act. He was the mastermind of a large, organized operation involving multiple people. The FBI, conducting an undercover investigation, stepped in. The prosecutor in charge of the case was my brother. My brother, like me, had pursued a career in law and had been appointed as a prosecutor. As a side note, this achievement enabled him to transfer to the FBI, which he had been aspiring to. The disciplinary committee is currently deliberating on Stanley's case, and it's likely he will face the most severe sanction, disbarment. Disbar lawyers lose their license for a certain period, and very few are readmitted upon reapplication. The divorce with Stanley was finalized. I plan to claim the maximum amount of compensation, though it won't reach $500,000. However, I doubt a convicted, unemployed Stanley will have the capacity to pay. My uncle apologized to me. He had suspected something amiss under the current Bar Association's management and hoped that I would uncover it by transferring there. At that time, he didn't know the details and had no idea who the culprit was. But he felt uneasy about my marriage to Stanley, a lawyer of the same Bar Association. It all made sense why he had a troubled expression when I announced my marriage, but it wasn't his fault. It was my shortcoming for not seeing people's true nature. I'm determined to avoid losing trust in people because of this incident. I want to continue using the law for the good of society and for justice.
In the dimly lit room as evening falls, the intercom rang. I wiped away the tears that had streamed down my cheeks and looked at the monitor to see who rang the intercom. My mother-in-law and Ashley were standing side by side. I thought to myself, they've come to help. I hurried to the entrance. When I opened the door, I was astonished. "Come on, please, and bring everything in quickly." At my mother-in-law's voice, people who looked like movers entered, saying, "Excuse us?" Huh? What? Wait a minute, what's going on? Hearing my confused voice, Sean hurried down the stairs from his room on the second floor. "What's wrong, Mom?" Sean asked me this question while watching the movers bustling around. This is... As I looked back at Sean, puzzled, my mother-in-law and Ashley spoke. "We're taking your house. You guys get out. Haha." "That's right, get out right now." Meanwhile, my father-in-law briskly directed the movers, and their things were quickly moved into the living room and other rooms. Suddenly, Sean, his face pale, raised his voice in protest. "No, you can't do that. Don't you all know? This house isn't Dad's anymore, and there are ghosts here." My father-in-law turned around, and the movers stopped in their tracks. In the center of everyone's attention, Sean was trembling. "My name is Gina, 41 years old. My husband John is 42 years old and he's an office worker. He's gentle, doesn't drink, smoke, or gamble. He works hard every day for our family. John's hobby is watching movies with me on weekends. Until last year, our son Sean used to go out with us, but since starting middle school, he's been spending more weekends with his friends than with us. While I felt a bit sad about that, John seemed to find it endearing." Reminiscing, he spoke about not attending the private high school his parents recommended, becoming the student council president, and about his best friend from high school. "Your best friend was Eric, right? John, you've always been a top student." I teased him a bit, and John laughed. "If my parents heard that, they'd be furious." Lost in memories, John murmured, "Still, those were fun times." "Are you having fun now?" As I asked him while watching a DVD at home, John simply replied, "Yes, I am." Then he looked around the living room and corrected himself. "More than fun, I'd say I'm happy. We have our own house, I'm married to a kind wife, and we have a healthy son." He said with a face that clearly showed he couldn't ask for more. "You should say a beautiful wife." As I playfully swung my arm, John dodged and laughed. Yes, I'm happy with my beautiful wife. I'll work hard to pay off the mortgage. We're still paying off the mortgage on our house. John has arranged the mortgage so I can be a stay-at-home mom without any financial strain. I'm the one who's truly happy to have such a kind husband. As I sat next to John watching the DVD, I thought this to myself. Although John says he's happy with our life since marriage, I think he wasn't very happy when he was living at his parents' house before we got married. It was obvious, even to an outsider, that he didn't get along well with his parents and his sister Ashley. I heard that the trouble started when John didn't go to the high school his parents wanted him to. Ashley, who is 2 years older than John, obediently attended the high school their parents chose. She went to the college they suggested and got a job at a company they approved of.
Ashley can't think or decide for herself anymore.
According to John, that's the state she's in. It's easy to follow your parents' orders, but you turn into a robot who can't act without being told what to do. You lose the ability to adapt and make your own decisions. As expected, she felt out of place at her job where she couldn't do anything without being instructed what to do and quit within a year. Then her parents quickly arranged a marriage for her and she married her husband. Even though John was there, they adopted her husband into their family. I don't understand why they would do that when they have a proper eldest son like John. Besides, their father was just an ordinary office worker. I didn't see the need for them to strain financially to send Ashley to a private high school.
Oh, that's just their stupid pride. My parents' pride.
John said there was a wealthy family in their neighborhood. Their daughter, the same age as Ashley, had been sent to private schools since elementary school, setting her apart from other kids. There was no specific incident with that family, but John's parents envied them. They worked hard to save money to send Ashley to a private high school. Because of this, their dinners were all made from cheap ingredients, but Ashley's lunchbox was always luxurious. John didn't see the need for such a struggle and chose to attend a public high school. I think that was the right decision, but his parents were furious and their attitude towards John changed completely from that day. They seemed proud when mentioning the high school their daughter attended. They might have felt ashamed to say their son attended a public high school, but chasing a higher lifestyle unnecessarily wasn't worth it. John's parents, Ashley, her husband, and their 3 children, 7 people in total, live in a rented house. I'm not saying rented is bad, but I do wonder if they could have used their money more effectively than just for appearances. They even took loans to send Ashley to private schools and are still paying them off. I can't understand their way of thinking or their attitude towards money. This was also evident in the amount of Christmas money they gave. The amount they gave to Ashley's children and Sean was completely different. It might be a difference in affection since they live with Ashley's children, but I feel sorry for Sean. I sighed, thinking how Sean is even affected by this. It seems John's parents and Ashley's family are also unhappy that we own our own house. Our house is a 2-story house. Our 4 rooms were larger than John's parents' house.
A study room? How pretentious for someone who went to a public school. Such a nice house is wasted on you. They sometimes visit our house and would say such terrible things. Moreover, they would pick at things like there's a stain here or the rug is discolored, and then complain it's not as great as it seems. I really don't understand the point of doing that. If they don't like it, they shouldn't come over. John would say,
They're probably just envious. They're just jealous because we were able to buy a house, even though we don't have much money and are still paying off a loan.
John laughed, saying it's all because they're too concerned with keeping up appearances. I'm sure Ashley's husband doesn't have a low salary either. Even John's father, who is in his 60s, is still working, but their debt repayment is holding them back.
Don't worry about it.
John said this, but when John and Sean are not around, my mother-in-law and Ashley come over. Lately, they even wander around the house while I'm preparing coffee.
They should turn our bedroom into this room. My husband likes this room. This room is big, so it'd be good for the kids' study,
they would say, making plans as if it was their house. What are you doing? I couldn't help but feel uncomfortable about this. Hearing me, the 2 of them suddenly flashed insincere smiles.
we were just looking around. Yeah, you were taking too long to make coffee.
I closed the door of the room they were peeking into and asked them to return to the living room. I was a bit horrified when my mother-in-law asked for a duplicate key. There's no way I could give her a key to wander around our house as she pleases. She could enter the house when no one's around and rummage through our drawers and closets. Even though they treat John terribly, they have the audacity to ask for a key. I'll have to discuss that with John. I said this to deflect the situation and later had John call them to firmly refuse.
How can you not give your parents a key?
She was angry, but unfortunately, these are parents we can't trust.
Just make sure to come over when Gina or I are home.
John said this and hung up the phone. As they say, health is wealth. Now at this age, those words truly resonate with me. John has been diagnosed with cancer. We were at a loss for words when he had a stomach checkup and found out. Each test reveals more cancer spreading throughout his body. The doctor said he only has a few months to live without surgery. We have insurance, but it's not enough to cover everything. Not just hospital bills, but living expenses and the mortgage too. The happiness we had built seemed to crumble in an instant. The fear of losing John and the anxiety about our future life made my body tremble. I didn't know what to do and was just scared.
I'll ask my parents for help.
My own parents have passed away. Being an only child, I have no other relatives to rely on in times like this. Okay, I'll go too. We went to John's parents and Ashley's family to explain the situation and ask for financial help.
Cancer can often be cured nowadays, right?
Ashley didn't seem to fully grasp the situation. John's parents, while not as dismissive as Ashley, seemed reluctant to offer financial assistance.
I thought I heard a few months ago that the debts were fully paid off. Yes, we finally managed to pay them off. Please, I beg you. We'll definitely pay you back. Please lend us the money for the surgery and hospitalization. The money you were going to use for my private school, lend it to us now.
Please, I'll work too. Please help us. We were practically begging on our knees.
Huh? No way. We've just started to be able to afford some luxuries recently.
When I die, the mortgage will be waived because I have insurance for that.
When that time comes, we'll sell the house if we have to, but we'll definitely repay the money we borrow. We'll even write and sign an agreement. We begged and pleaded over and over. However, John's parents never agreed, and although we somewhat expected it, we were left in despair.
Then why don't you just sell the house now?
Of course, we knew that was ultimately our only option, but if we sell it now, we must deduct the remaining loan balance from the selling price and also cover hospital fees, treatment costs, and the rent for a new place for us. I heard that even after moving out from his parents' house to live on his own before he met me, John used to send money home. I thought it wouldn't be wrong for them to spend a little bit of money for John. No matter how much we begged, John's parents and Ashley's answer didn't change. John straightened up and replied with a flat voice.
I understand. That's enough.
As we were leaving their house, Ashley's husband followed us and said,
Wait! I know this isn't nearly enough, and I'm embarrassed to say I don't have savings.
He quietly handed John $1,000. It's no surprise he doesn't have savings. He had been helping with the debt repayment too. Despite their proud claims of,
we finally paid it off,
it was partly thanks to Ashley's husband.
I'll try to persuade them again. Please, don't lose hope.
We thanked Ashley's husband, who said this.
Thank you. Your thoughts alone are enough. But still, do you have any other plans? Yes, as Ashley suggested, we're thinking of selling the house.
What? I couldn't help but let out a voice. Selling the house sounds simple, but it involves procedures and will take time. We won't be ready in time for John's hospitalization in a few days. Even if it's sold, we also have to find a new place to live. It's not a matter that can be resolved smoothly.
It's okay. I just remember that there's someone who might be able to help.
John looked at me and smiled. Over the 2 years since the cancer was found, John had fought hard. Despite being given only a few months to live, he made countless happy memories with our family, in and out of hospitalizations. Though his family and we had grown distant, when the doctor said,
"He might not be able to return home,"
I contacted his family. They did visit a few times after that, but their attitude was indifferent, and they left quickly after saying,
"He still looks okay."
It's almost like they're checking to see how much longer John has. I shook my head quickly, trying to dismiss such a negative thought. Then the doctor said it was time to inform the family. In a panic, I called John's mother.
Oh my, that's serious. I must hurry.
Yes, please come to the hospital room immediately.
Huh? Oh, okay. I'll come if I can.
After she hung up, I felt uneasy, but quickly returned to the hospital room where John and Sean were waiting. In the end, the only ones who came were Ashley's husband, who came directly from his workplace, and John's close friend, Eric. Despite this, John, barely able to open his eyes, looked around at all of us and then closed his eyelids. The funeral arrangements and other preparations were helped by Ashley's husband and Eric. While we went home to prepare, Ashley's husband stayed with John, and Eric drove us. We had left the hospital in the morning, but by the time we got home, the sun was already setting. Sean and I had rushed out in the morning, leaving breakfast uncleaned. In the dimly lit house, I turned on the lights. Sitting in the brightened living room, I opened the photo album. As I flipped through the album, tears naturally began to flow. Wiping the tears that fell on the table, I selected a photo from the memories to use for the funeral portrait. Then, the intercom rang. I wiped the tears streaming down my cheeks and looked at the monitor to see who rang the intercom. My mother-in-law and Ashley were standing side by side. I thought to myself, they've come to help. Though they didn't make it in time for John's final moment, they had come, so I hurried to the front door. But upon opening it, I was astonished.
Come on, please start bringing everything in.
At my mother-in-law's command, people who appeared to be movers entered, saying,
"Excuse us."
"What? Wait, please, what's going on?" Hearing my confused voice, Sean hurried down the stairs from his room on the second floor.
"What's wrong, Mom?"
Sean asked while watching the movers bustling around. "This is..." As I looked back at Sean, puzzled, my mother-in-law and Ashley spoke.
"We're taking over your house. You all get out." That's right. Leave right now.
Meanwhile, my father-in-law briskly gave orders, and the movers quickly carried things into the living room and other rooms. Suddenly, Sean, his face pale, raised his voice in protest.
"No, you can't do that. Don't you all know?"
Sean's face was ashen.
"This house isn't Dad's anymore, and there are ghosts here."
My father-in-law turned around, and the movers stopped moving. In the center of everyone's attention, Sean was trembling. Amidst this, a man entered from the front door.
"Who the hell are you to bring stuff into someone else's house? Get out now."
At Eric's loud voice, which echoed throughout the house and neighborhood, everyone jumped. Without confirming with the in-laws, the movers immediately started taking out the things they had brought in. Left unsure what to do, the items were placed on the street in front of the house.
"Oh no, my desk!"
Turning at the sound of Ashley's son's voice, I saw Ashley's husband with his 3 children. As the children complained about their belongings lying on the street, Ashley's husband questioned Ashley.
"I came because I heard about a sudden move, but what's going on?"
Ashley's husband, usually calm, was angry.
What? Mom and Dad said they were moving. What are you talking about? You agreed to this.
Amidst their ugly quarrel, Ashley's husband coldly declared,
"I can't deal with you all anymore. I want a divorce."
What? Wait, what are you saying?
Ashley's husband negotiated directly with the movers to have only his and the children's belongings moved to his parents' house.
"Sorry for the trouble at such a difficult time. For now, I'll have the children and our stuff moved to my parents' house."
Without even a glance at Ashley, Ashley's husband and the children left with the movers. Ashley collapsed, crying on the street, and the in-laws stood dumbfounded among their things.
Neighbors started coming out to see what was happening, turning the situation into a nightmarish scene.
For now, it's best to move these things inside the house so they're not in the way, right?
At Eric's suggestion, I nodded. Yes, that's fine. This is your house after all. Well, what do you mean? The in-laws looked at us, bewildered, not understanding what was going on. The truth was, 2 years ago, the day after John's family refused to help us financially, he brought a very intimidating person home. And that was Eric. He gave me his business card indicating he runs a real estate agency. Apparently he's an old high school classmate of John's, but his intimidating appearance and aura made me think he was from that sort of business. Sean, still a middle schooler, clung to me in fear and wouldn't leave my side. Worried, I glanced over at John. Noticing my gaze, John tilted his head and then burst into laughter after a while.
It's okay. Eric may look scary, but he's a respectable man now.
Now? Sean picked up on that, pointing it out timidly. Suddenly, Eric's eyes widened, and he smacked John on the head. John! I couldn't believe it. John is sick, after all. But John just laughed out loud. Sean looked so pale, I was worried if he was even breathing.
Eric didn't even come to our wedding, even though I sent him an invitation, and he never visits us, no matter how many times I invite him.
Ah. That reminded me, in John's stories about his student days, Eric's name often came up. From the stories, I had imagined Eric as a trustworthy, good friend, so I never thought they could be the same person.
Look at me, you can tell. I didn't attend the wedding or visit your house because my appearance would cause trouble. Ah, that's why you're still single? Say that again and I'll hit you.
From their playful banter, it was clear he was the Eric I had heard about. I couldn't help but chuckle at their conversation. They both stopped and looked at me. Sorry, it's just that John looks so happy.
Oh, he's always like this. Eric, Sean is here. A father's dignity is important.
Dignity? You never had that.
Sean.
The mood immediately lightened as the conversation started to flow. I told Eric how disappointed John was that Eric couldn't attend our wedding, and said he was welcome anytime.
Thank you. Let's move on to business now. We don't have much time.
Eric turned into a serious tone.
First, let me see the condition of the house.
Eric went around each room inspecting the state of the house, even checking the exterior walls and meter box. Afterward, he took out his laptop and started typing. After a while, he turned the screen to show us.
How about this amount for the selling price?
I was taken aback by the amount he suggested. It was higher than what we paid for the house. That's a very generous selling price, but can we really sell it for that price? It's been about 10 years since we've lived here, and if it doesn't sell, it would be counterproductive. We hadn't renovated in years. Like my mother-in-law and sister-in-law said, there are stains here and there, and the rugs are old.
Oh, I heard from John about their conversation. We should use this room for this. That means they think it's livable as it is. Don't worry. It will sell for this price.
John also assured me to trust Eric. Okay, please proceed with this price. As I thanked him, Eric swiftly laid out several documents on the table. Oh, and we need to find a new place to live. Eric responded with a smile.
Yes.
He also placed rental agreement papers alongside the other documents.
First, I will buy the house directly. That's one worry off your list. Then, I'll rent the house back to you. There. Now it's all solved.
What? As I stood there stunned, Eric continued.
I will transfer the money from the house sale to your account within a few days. We can pay off the remaining mortgage with that.
Eric smiled, a boyish grin that made his earlier intimidating appearances seem like a distant memory. As I filled out the documents, I noticed the rental fee. $100? John and Sean seemed surprised too, peering over the documents.
You mean $1,000, right?
As we laughed, thinking it was a mistake, Eric said,
No, that's not a mistake. I owe that much to John.
After some thought, John said,
No, you don't.
but Eric started to share their story from their student days. Eric was a real delinquent in school, getting into trouble with the police and tended to be in fights that made his mother cry. One day, his mother, who was a single parent, was hospitalized due to exhaustion and stress. Rushing to the hospital, Eric was shocked to see how frail and thin his mother had become. Realizing his actions contributed to her condition, he broke down and cried like a child. From there, Eric had a change of heart, stopped fighting, and no longer got into trouble with the police. But one day a cigarette butt was found on the school roof, which led to a small fire. The school made a big deal out of it, and Eric, with his bad reputation, was immediately presumed guilty. No matter how much he denied it, no one believed him because of his past behavior. He was on the verge of being expelled and making his mother cry again, but John was the one who believed in Eric's innocence.
He was the only one who believed in my innocence. The student council president at the time, you know. We had been in the same class, but never really talked before.
Eric fondly recalled how John went to the principal's office to protest, interviewed other students, and gathered evidence to find the real culprit.
Well, yeah. You said you didn't do it, so I believed you. No one believes that. But thanks to you, I was able to graduate high school, take care of my mother, and even become a company CEO.
That's why he owed so much to John. We as a family looked at each other and gratefully accepted his proposal for the rent of our house. This was the story of what happened 2 years ago.
As Sean said, the house is now owned by me, and I'm just renting it to this family. If you don't believe it, I can show you the documents later.
Eric glanced at Sean, then turned back to my in-laws with a smile.
However, if you would like to rent the house, I can offer it to either family at a very affordable rate.
I was surprised, but Eric smiled.
I can also introduce you to new properties.
After the funeral, we moved out of the house and into a 2-room apartment that Eric had recommended.
Just unpack the bare essentials. You'll be able to move back into that house soon.
Eric grinned, and I asked why he thought so. Sean, curious, came closer to us.
Originally, I thought about kicking them out right away, but I changed my mind. Listen, here's the plan.
Eric leaned in to tell us a secret. 3 days later, we returned to the house under the pretense of forgetting some belongings. With Eric accompanying us, my mother-in-law reluctantly served coffee and snacks.
How's living here? Not bad at all.
Satisfied, my father-in-law replied, to which Sean asked,
Really? Really? You haven't heard strange noises on the empty stairs or in the bathroom?
Sean looked around the living room apprehensively.
Right. Sean mentioned something about a ghost. Yeah, Mom might not know, but ever since Dad was hospitalized, I began to hear some strange noise. I thought Mom had returned because I saw the hem of a skirt at the top of the stairs, but no one was there.
That's nonsense.
To my mother-in-law's remark, Sean and Eric were startled and simultaneously looked upstairs.
Is someone upstairs?
Of course not. No one was upstairs. Ashley, now depressed after her divorce, didn't speak, but she was in the living room.
Stop saying weird things.
I didn't hear anything.
Sean and Eric hurriedly packed up.
Glad to hear it. We'll be taking our leave now.
They quickly left the house and rushed into the car. My in-laws, who had come to see us off, looked frightened. In the car, we burst into laughter. Eric's plan was to use the lie Sean spontaneously told about the house being haunted.
It's punishment for how they treated John. What kind of world do we live in where parents and a sister prepare to move into their dying son's house and not even help him?
Eric said this bitterly as he drove. His words seemed absolutely true. As it turned out, Eric and Sean kept repeating such stories, and soon even unspoken supernatural phenomena seemed to occur in that house. My in-laws and Ashley brainwashed themselves, mistaking house noises for poltergeists. They came to us with various complaints, but we never experienced any of it.
It's scary what people can convince themselves of,
Sean said, laughing. Eventually, unable to bear it, my in-laws and Ashley moved out of the house. They rented a place within their budget, which Eric had arranged for them.
Oh, I took care of that business properly. I found them a budget-friendly, rundown apartment.
Eric smirked, and Sean and I applauded. Ashley, now divorced, had to start working again to pay child support. She was truly experiencing the harsh realities of life. Now that she had to take care of her parents on her own, I hoped she would manage well. Eventually, we moved back into the house John and I had bought. We couldn't buy it back, but we were still able to live there for a rent of $100. Ashley's husband and his 3 children started visiting us. Ashley, who asked for a reconciliation, was not being considered by him at all. Once a month, Eric would come to collect the rent, coinciding with John's monthly Memorial Day. After paying respects at the altar, we would have dinner together, and Sean would listen to Eric's memories of his time with John. Secretly, Sean and I looked forward to these dinners. They were filled with stories of John's school days, revealing aspects of him we never knew. Eric being part of our family now, I was sure John was smiling with us, making excuses like a child saying,
Well, you know.